Genre is a French word meaning type or kind, and war genre is the genre associated most with human tragedies and suffering. Its popularity within the mainstream suggests audiences' infatuation with it. According to Steve Niall, war films have conventionally been considered, quote, films about the waging of war in the 20th century, unquote. However, Shane Russell Earl writes that it deals with, quote, the roles of civilians, espionage agents, and soldiers in any of the aspects of war, unquote. War films, therefore, do not have to be situated in combat zones. Research suggests that despite the death and the destruction that war provides, an overlooked category of its aftermath is the generational trauma and impact that affects the upbringing of children. Two war genre films that successfully portray the impact of conflict and its resulting trauma are Turtles Can Fly 2004, directed by Bahman Qubadi, and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas 2008 by Mark Herman. Turtles Can Fly is a film directed in Kurdistan, an occupied region by then Iraq's Ba'athist regime under Saddam Hussein. The story revolves around the lives of Soran, or Kak Satellite, a teenage leader and organizer of children in a Kurdish refugee camp, and three siblings from the city of Halabja that carry many traumas: Hangov, Agrin, and their unnamed, quote, brother. The residents of the refugee camp patiently await the news regarding the US invasion of Iraq and the liberation of Kurdistan from Saddam's brutal regime. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas tells the story of Bruno, an 8-year-old German boy who moves with his parents from Berlin to rural occupied Poland after his father Ralph, an SS officer, is promoted. There, Bruno discovers a concentration camp in which he befriends a Jewish boy his own age, Shmuel. Bruno is taught that Jewish people are despicable, which contradicts his real-life intuition towards Shmuel. War genre must not be confused with the combat film subgenre, where it is recognized by active military drills, offensives, or operations with combat taking place in a battlefield. Turtles Can Fly and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas are not combat films, but rather depictions of the daily lives of the people directly or indirectly affected by war, particularly children. Brotherhood and unity, or the lack thereof, are considered to be common themes in Kurdish cinema. In fact, many Kurdish movies often include children as protagonists in their movies, as one way of highlighting the generational trauma oppression or war has imposed on Kurdish children. Quote, this is the first time a number of narrative and documentary films have been made about an ongoing unpopular war, unquote, says Robert Eberwein on the Iraq War. Turtles Can Fly is separate. It's a local take on the issue, which received wide international love. Likewise, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas was also feared to gain negative reception as yet another Holocaust movie. Quote, there was nothing new about a Holocaust movie, nothing new, even about a Holocaust movie seen through the eyes of a child, but seen through the eyes of a German child. That was new to me, unquote, said director Mark Herman. The fresh perspective Bruno provided as a human connection between two boys of different ethnicities demonstrates to the audience the innocence of fraternity, an ideal that only adult ideologies challenge and mold. Qubadi, a Kurdish director that has lived through the conflicts and traumas that Kurdish children have undergone, took it upon himself to convey the neglected story of Kurdish people to the rest of the world. Quote, it was out of my control, said Qubadi. My intention was to make a movie in the city about adults, but when I went there I saw so many children with such desperation, these children without limbs, I could not deny their cry, unquote. Contrast this with Herman's connection to the Holocaust, or the lack thereof. Despite Herman being an English director with little connection to the Jewish issue, he possessed a good connection to the Jewish composer James Horner and deeply sympathized with the events of the Holocaust. However, some critics of Herman's works claim that his movie does not provide an accurate depiction of the Holocaust, as children were immediately killed in such concentration camps. Herman's intention was purely to portray the tragedy of the Holocaust through the eyes of children, their innocence versus the world that they live in, which is a creation of adult ideologies, whether it be Nazism or Baathism. The feeling of entrapment is an important feeling that both films exhibit through the use of a common war film convention, a challenging setting, often consisting of dirt, mud, and grit. However, this only encompasses a small portion of The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, in opposition to Turtles Can Fly, where the whole film is based on a challenging setting and conditions in which life is difficult to survive in. This poses a challenge to the upbringing of many children and questions the level of trauma that they face. One may suggest that Kurdish refugees are, quote, sentenced to life. That is, they are physically alive, but without the tools to live life to the full, unquote. In The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, the exposure is often very bright and lively in Berlin, in contrast with the Jewish camp, resembling a duality of lives present throughout the film. A privileged German life of a Nazi family, contrasted with the oppressive and torturing lives of the Jewish people. The Kurdish refugee camp on the Kurdistan borders with Turkey are depicted with a wide shot of the Turkish watchtower to highlight the entrapment of the refugees between their enemies, the Iraqi Baathists on one hand, and the Turks and their dominance on the other. The refugee camp is explicitly barbed, caged from the outside world in a similar fashion to The Boy in the Striped Pajamas' Jewish camp. The main difference is that children in the refugee camp willingly subject themselves to potential amputation, while the Jewish children are forced to endure labor. Violence and the depiction of a common villain is another convention of the war genre films. Amputees are a common sight in Turtles Can Fly, and the SS soldiers take any opportunity presented to them to abuse the Jewish people. This is characterized with the depiction of wounds, blood, and beating marks in both films. Oftentimes in this genre, violence is met with the death of a loved one, and the deaths of Bruno and Agrin reflect a loss of grievance for their family members. Both films take separate routes towards achieving this goal. For example, Agrin, the Halabja girl in Turtles Can Fly, eventually meets her death through suicide, whereas Bruno's death could be argued to be passive suicide, where he naively walks into the Jewish camp in prisoner attire and gets murdered along the Jews in the gas chamber. The character's, quote, schizoid autistic-like features, unquote, is very present and rooted in trauma for both films, especially where Bruno's Jewish maid and Shmuel are constantly looking down, unable to raise their head or voice, and the children's behavior in Turtles Can Fly. In Turtles Can Fly, many conventions fulfill the weaponry criterion of war films, in particular, the display of heavy artillery, rifles, and landmines. This is called iconography, the props and costumes used throughout the film. Despite fulfilling the Nazi iconography throughout The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, not a single bullet is fired. Bruno lives a carefree life in the heart of the Nazi regime, whereas children his age, such as Shmuel, toil in concentration camps. In The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, this common enemy is the Jew, not the Jewish people. What Bruno's tutor describes as a singular nuisance, the Jew, is meant to dehumanize and trivialize the existence of the Jews as a people, similar to the Ba'athist regime's approach to the Kurds. In fact, Agrin lost her parents in Halabja, a town known for its infamous chemical attack massacre of 1988. Both the Jewish and Kurdish people are sent to camps to suffer different fates, but with a similar token of being subjected to a life that barely resembles one, a life that strips children away from their childhood. Lastly, symbolism is an important element present in war genre films. This is even seen in the posters of both movies. Many film posters in modern Kurdish cinema depict a person carrying or rescuing a loved one from an imminent danger, a gesture that symbolizes the Kurdish desire for a rescuer, or how Kurds must rescue themselves from their oppressors. Turtles Can Fly has a striking resemblance to the iconic photo of the Halabja chemical attack of 1988, instigated by Iraq's regime under Saddam Hussein against the Kurds, where a sister carries her sibling away from danger. Furthermore, many instances of medium and wide shots of Agrin are purposefully meant to depict her carrying her brother, to constantly refer to her origin and remind the audience of the Halabja massacres and the hardships of Agrin. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is a depiction of two sides of the same coin, where both children sharing a childhood and a common age, yet segregated by their identity and status of privilege, or the lack thereof, displayed through the barbed wires and electrical fences of the camp. Turtles Can Fly poses strong symbolism in its title, which alludes to the metaphoric ability of turtles, children, having the ability to escape, or to fly away from their issues. As Agrin decides to murder her illegitimate son, who was a cause of a rape, and later commits suicide by jumping off a cliff, the image of a turtle is displayed as symbolism for Agrin and her son's escape from life, whatever her life even meant to begin with. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas symbolism is seen through the attire the Jewish inmates wear. To Bruno, the camp is nothing but a playground. The inmate attire that the Jews are forced to wear is not a uniform, but rather pajamas. The code on their shirts is not a code, but a play number. Whereas in Turtles Can Fly, a key interest of all children is to make a living, Bruno's primary concern is playing with his friends all day. War genre films, particularly American Hollywood films, are characterized by a desire to liberate and democratize. Turtles Can Fly ridicules this sentiment with the use of irony. Satellite's infatuation with the English language and his rudimentary understanding of it puts him in a position of leadership in the camp. He wishes to travel to the US once the Americans arrive, until he loses a leg as a result of an American mine. This later becomes a remark an uncle makes towards Satellite. This is further made explicit at the end of the film, where despite all his former anticipation, Satellite turns around as he sees American troops arrive, surprising his friend as a result. In conclusion, both Turtles Can Fly and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas are examples of war genre films that use its conventions diligently to depict the impact of war and its resulting traumas. This is achieved through depicting a sense of entrapment, violence and villains, and symbolism throughout the film.